We back at it. We back at it. What's good, spooky gang? I hope y'all having a blessed day. We diving into the Conjuring universe, so shoot, let's go ahead and get to it. Welcome back to Terror of Tech. So today we're ranking all of the movies in the Conjuring franchise. Now there are 9 movies in this franchise so far. Some of these are some of my favorite movies of all time, and some of these are, yeah. But we're about to get into all of that right now. So without further ado, coming in at number 9, in last place of the entire franchise, we've got The Curse of La Llorona. Anyone who isn't familiar with this movie, just to give a quick synopsis: ignoring the eerie warning of a troubled woman suspected of child endangerment, a social worker and her small kids are soon drawn into a frightening supernatural realm. For me, if you've seen this movie, I haven't met anybody in the world that has seen this movie that thinks this is a good movie. For me, it came with a really good concept. I mean, for people who aren't familiar, La Llorona is a real story or like folk tale in Spanish or Hispanic culture. And essentially, what La Llorona is a wailing woman whose misdeeds in life have left her spirit trapped on earth where she torments children. So this movie is based on that story and that folk tale. You know, you see La Llorona going after, tormenting little kids and whatnot, but just a lot of the scares were just so cheap and not there was no real tension building. The storyline of the movie in general just wasn't overly compelling, besides the concept of La Llorona. She didn't play out visually on screen all that well. In the beginning they did a good job of making La Llorona seem creepy, but overall this movie just wasn't one that was very notable, so it's coming in at number 9. So moving on to number 8, we have The Nun 2. The Nun 2 just came out this past year, and it was one of those movies that I didn't even really have high expectations for in general, because at this point, this movie is the most recent of all of the Conjuring films, and by this point, they've almost milked the Conjuring movies to death. So, with this being the most recent movie, I'm sure, with a lot of the elements that were in it, it's things that we've seen before a million times, not only, in horror in general, but seen a million times in the Conjuring movies themselves. So by the time you get to this point, there weren't any real expectations for this movie. A couple things that I did like about the movie is, I love the carryover, having Tessa Farmiga play her role again in the movie. So you have a level of continuity there, which is pretty cool. But overall, although I would say in some aspects it was probably a little more fun, but it still suffers from a lot of the same aspects that the first Nun suffer from. And that actually brings us to number 7 on this list, which is The Nun. Now, I know a lot of you who have seen my previous video, I had Valak as, I think it was top 8 for the best horror villains of all time. And while I truly believe that Valak had a large impact on horror culture and everything like that, the 2 standalone movies that Valak got in this franchise were clearly, based on this ranking, one of the worst in my opinion. And IMDb and a lot of other sources and general opinion, a lot of people agree that The Nun wasn't all that great of a movie. Now, one thing I will certainly give it credit for is it is very aesthetically pleasing. That movie is shot beautifully. I just love those large range shots of the Vatican, the Abbey, or the big church, the big building. Just seeing it from the outside, and then just seeing the lighting use was done really well, and inside of the church or the abbey or whatever they're inside, it creates a very ominous and unsettling feeling. But ultimately, other than visual effects, the story didn't follow through all that well. Wasn't that great, unfortunately. So that is why The Nun is coming in at number 7. Now, coming in at number 6, we have Annabelle Creation. Annabelle Creation, just in general, I think Annabelle Creation was a pretty good movie. It's not my favorite of the Annabelles, obviously, but I thought it was pretty good. When I first watched the movie, I actually thought that it was better than the first one that came out in 2014. I liked the idea of like the orphanage and all the girls, and then the way that they had to deal with the doll and the things that the doll was doing to them, and then we get a little more detail or a little more information on Annabelle's origin and all of that good stuff. So it was pretty good. And although there definitely were some good scares, specifically like that wheelchair scene where she's getting pushed out to the shed and she can't see what's pushing her behind her, and then she looks up and then you just see like this silhouette of this figure or whatever. So no, that was a really good scare. But ultimately, this movie just, over time, it just didn't age all that well. But, from time to time when I do watch it, I still enjoy it a little bit. Now, coming in at number 5, we have Annabelle. So, Annabelle is the first of the Annabelle series of movies within the Conjuring universe. For this movie, I almost had the opposite opinion as how I had Annabelle Creation. The first time I watched it in theaters, I thought it was kind of boring. It was just a real slow burn. Not a whole lot going on, especially in the beginning. I mean, yeah, you get the break-in scene with Annabelle. After that, it was really, really slow burn. But over time, this movie has really grown on me. I think it's really good overall. In the Conjuring franchise, it probably has I can confidently say that it has one of the top 5, maybe even top 3 scares of the entire franchise, which is from the basement scene where she was trying to get on the elevator and the elevator door wouldn't close, and all the way leading up to where she was standing at the top of the stairs and she turns around and looks down and then she sees the little demon thing. Man, listen, that was absolutely one of the best scares. That sticks with me, and whenever I'm recommending horror, like that's one of those situations where it makes me proud to be a horror fan. That was a well executed scene, and one that I would always recommend to people who are not only fans of horror, but people who are trying to get into horror and see what horror is about. That's why it's coming in at number 5. Coming in at number 4, we have The Conjuring 3. So The Conjuring 3, when I first watched that, I believe that came out in 2021. It was fresh off of COVID, so I know a lot of people weren't able to see that movie in theaters. But when I did watch it, I watched it at the crib. I think it came on HBO Max. I watched it with my brother and sister, and I thought it was a very good movie. A guy who stabs and murders his landlord because he claimed that he was under demonic possession. I think that was a cool angle. It has some extra layers in the story with them trying to figure it out. It has some really creative scares in it as well. The whole scene where the leading up to him killing the landlord was really good, really dark. I thought this was a really solid movie. The only thing that I would say that I didn't really care for so much was the ending. Too much of the love conquers all, especially after you've seen it so much in this franchise. At a certain point it kind of does get a little old, but regardless, this is still a really good movie. And that's why it's coming in at number 4. Coming in at number 3, we have Annabelle Comes Home. Now this is a banger to me. Ed and Lorraine bring the Annabelle doll home. A babysitter of their daughter, Judy, and the babysitter's friend essentially get terrorized the entire day while they're babysitting. The thing that I like about this movie the most is the fact that once the scares start, they don't stop pretty much the entire movie. Almost every single scene has some form of a scare in it, whether it's just very unsettling music as they're walking through the house, just the tension and how unsettling, and from the very first time that there was a scare in the house to the very end of the movie, that's like it's a non-stop scare fest. The majority of the scares worked. Take appreciation into the scares and the way that they were crafted, and it was just cool to actually finally seeing the Warren house in full, because in all of the other Conjuring, see the outside, or you might see one room, or you might see a hallway, but you never really saw the entire house. Well, in this movie you see almost every single inch of the house, so it's pretty cool. I love the layout of the house. I think that's what also adds to what makes things scary. Really good movie, one that I certainly recommend to anybody who's a fan of horror for sure, and that's why it's coming in at number 3. Coming in at number 2, and this easily could have been number 1 as well, and it's dang near a 1A 1B type of situation, but to list 1 at 2, and so 2 will be The Conjuring 2. The Conjuring 2 is essentially a masterpiece in horror, in my opinion. I remember the very first time I watched it, I had very high expectations for the movie coming off of The Conjuring 1. That was one of the times I realized, and this is back in 2016 when the movie came out, but that was one of those times where I realized that you have to stop going into movies with expectations. Just let the movie, if the movie impresses you and is really good, then great. But when you go into a movie with high expectations and then they don't reach it, it makes the movie worse than what it probably actually was. And so it's one thing I stopped doing, because when I watched The Conjuring 2 the first time in theaters, I, God honest, didn't really enjoy it that much. You just sitting back with your arms folded and you're just like, oh, this isn't scary, this, that, and the other. Oh, well, when they gonna get to the real stuff? This, and it's like all that stuff doesn't even matter. Like, sit back, relax, just sit there and enjoy yourself, watch the movie. And so when I watched it the second time I watched it at home, I put on headphones, like just big over the ear headphones, so I could really lock in. The screen was like 2 inches away from my face, so I was fully immersed in. So I was watching it, and I was like, well, like my opinion completely changed the second time I watched it. I thought it was so great and really scary. And then the cool thing about it is that you didn't even really know that Valak was behind it until the end of the movie. So you're just sitting there thinking that it's just this old Bill Wilkins old man character. Since I'm bringing that up, that's another thing that was cool about it, is because it was multiple entities that you saw in this house as well. So obviously, like I said, the old man character, then there was the crooked man, and obviously Valak. No, it was just really cool, well executed, great acting, and I want to make sure that can't be understated. The acting was fantastic. The movie just genuinely doesn't really have any flaws, so it's coming in at number 2, but it very well could be number 1, and I'm sure you all know by now what number 1 is, and number 1 is coming in as The Conjuring. So, The Conjuring, similar to how I said to stop going into movies with expectations, specifically the trailer. When I watched the trailer, I thought that this was going to be, like I mentioned before, like a teeny bopper, a little cheesy movie, because, it did the little clap thing, so I was like, oh, well, I don't see how this movie is going to be taken serious or anything like that. But when I went and sat down and started watching that film, I thought it was a masterpiece. It was one of the best theatrical experiences that I've had to date. The scares were fantastic. Everything about it surprised me. The tension, just everything. And that's why The Conjuring is one of my favorite movies of all time. Another flawless movie in my opinion. And with the Conjuring movies, like I mentioned before, with horror cliches and tropes, yeah, it's all there. But they did everything that you are already familiar with, but they did it the best that it could possibly be done. And that's what I really like about it. I've always been really huge into haunted house stories and, paranormal situations at home, because at home is where you typically feel the most safe. And if you can't feel safe in your own home, no, then you're short. The Conjuring Man is one of the best horror movies of all time. Those classics, in my opinion. It just happened to be released in a newer era in 2013. But regardless, fantastic film, and that's why it's coming in at my number 1. So there we have it, spooky brothers and sisters. We have all 9 movies of the Conjuring universe ranked. And just to go back over it, we have The Curse of La Llorona, The Nun 2, The Nun, Annabelle Creation, Annabelle, The Conjuring 3, Annabelle Comes Home, The Conjuring 2, and The Conjuring. So I appreciate y'all watching it and kicking it with your boy. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe. Definitely comment what are some of your favorite movies in the Conjuring universe. Drop that down below. And until next time, I'll catch y'all later. Stay spooky.